Hi guys. Oh, it's been a while since we had a chat. Have you guys noticed how the world has been changing recently? Are you concerned? Well, my name is African Queen Mo. I'm in Wales. Thank you so much for your subscriptions and thank you for being here. Let's get straight to the topic before I go on. Now, you know what? This morning I could not sleep. I woke up very early, and I think many of us are affected by the same. Yeah, so much has changed in the recent past. In fact, many people are starting to associate the changes that we're experiencing to the period of COVID 2020. Since 2020, things have never been the same. But what people don't realize is that actually that season started earlier, about 3 years earlier. I would say from around 2017, that's when I started noticing the difference. Maybe because I work in the international, national non-governmental organizations, and I started traveling a lot. I was already noticing differences and changes and difference in attitudes even with employers. I noticed that my jobs were not coming as frequently as they were before. It was taking longer to apply and get jobs, and when you did get jobs, they were stretching the contracts. They were expecting you to put in much more effort compared to the amount of money they were willing to pay. It was making me think about potential changes in strategy. There was a time I used to apply for something like 50 jobs in a night. I would sit down and just, spend an entire night applying for jobs. And from there, at least I would get a couple of calls. But after that, the calls started reducing. Yet I also noticed that they were still advertising jobs. Jobs were still being advertised. It was as if that wasn't changing. Yeah, let me hold my microphone closer to me. The jobs were still being advertised, but it didn't appear as if really they existed. Because what happened is that you wouldn't get the same phone calls back. So I noticed that there was a change in culture around 2017, and I started talking to my team. I was running a consultancy firm, and I started talking to my team and telling them, if you guys get any extra work anywhere else, just go ahead and work. I won't penalize you, because I noticed that the jobs that we used to apply for were no longer streaming in as frequently as before, as previously. And there was no real reason for this, because the work was still there. There's plenty of work. But all of a sudden, the NGOs I was working for started complaining that they didn't have enough money and they were not getting funded. People like the United Nations, USAID, all these guys, they experienced serious funding cuts. And it affected our work so much that the work was still needed. I'm an evaluator by profession. The work was still required. The time required to do the job, though, was like cut in half. They started coming up with new methodologies, such as rapid assessments that could not give you in-depth detail, stories, in-depth information about how the funds were used and to what extent they were having any sort of impact or any sort of notable outcomes and strategies for change. We didn't really have enough time to do proper investigations and to arrive at proper conclusions that were practicable, because there was a change in funding. And you see, you can't make up this information. So I also noticed the growth of a lot of what you call briefcase consultants, people who are not qualified but still being preferred over the qualified consultants. So when I see that people are complaining that there are many jobs being advertised, and yet they go for interviews and people making excuses for why it is that they cannot hire them, or even just go to an interview and get ghosted, this is something that started around 2017. It only became more apparent to me after 2020, because at that point now, even the shift in focus happened in terms of the types of work that people were focusing on. So now there was no more interest in projects that had to do with climate change, agriculture, growing food, anything to do with waste and sanitation. Now the job was only COVID. That's it. It was just anything to do with COVID. And even at that particular time, you see, most of the COVID projects were just starting. So there was really no work anyway for me, because I'm supposed to come in kind of like in the middle and at the end. But all in all, just to let you know that I noticed a shift and a trend. And the first shift that happened was employers did not want to pay the kind of money that they used to pay us before. They didn't want to pay. And now I was like, what do you mean you're not going to pay? I mean, has my value, my worth suddenly shifted? What has changed? I'm still the same person. You still want the same qualification. You still want the experience. It was getting much more competitive but the opportunities were lacking. The opportunities were fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer. The opportunities were very few. Oh, okay, thank you. Starting to rain, guys. So yeah, I decided just to come over to the field, even if it's raining a bit, and talk to you here. The opportunities were no longer there the way they used to be, and I was getting concerned, very, very concerned about my ability to pay my bills, to pay my staff, to pay the people who work for me. I was really worried because I was like, how do I now start explaining to them that I can no longer pay them those salaries that I used to pay them, those contract fees I used to pay them? And yet these were contract fees that were agreed in advance with employers. Guys, I need to get back. I need to get back. It's really raining now. So guys, yeah, I'm back from outside because it was so windy and cold. You can't believe that this is Wales over the almost going into summer, and what is this? This is the month of May going into June, and here we are. My God. But anyway, yeah, it's a bank holiday today. So guys, guess what? Yeah. So this is what happened, that I noticed that the jobs situation started to change. Well, I guess many of us who are in the professional circles started to notice this probably earlier than many of the businesses, because I guess, people will still be going to, buy clothes, still had a little bit of savings. Maybe they're still using it for purchasing of things out there. But we in the professional circles, we noticed it. Doctors, nurses, teachers, professionals, especially researchers, we realized this earlier on, that there was a change. There was an obvious shift in 2020 and right before then. And I noticed immediately that though the jobs were being listed, they were being listed for far longer. So my question is, why is it that jobs were being posted for so long? You would expect that when a job has been posted on a website, for example, a position has been posted as open and vacant, that maybe within a week or two it wouldn't be there. But no, these jobs were continuing to be there for months, like 3 months, 4 months. And so you start to assume, well, when it came to 2020, we obviously associated it with not being able to travel. But before then, between 2018, 2020, you started to notice that as well. But I actually thought that that was because of reduced funding. And yes, there was already reduced funding. And a lot of these organizations, especially development organizations, started to complain and to warn us about the fact that, they were not being able to attract the kind of level of funding that they were before for their projects. So we were asked to reduce our fees, which we did. And they kept reducing it to the point where it became, impossible to do the job. It became, just inefficient all of a sudden. Because you see, if you want to hire qualified people, then you have to pay them. There has to be, something for you, in the end. You're not going to do work for free. Like, for example, they'll tell you, okay, this is your total fee and there'll be no money for travel. You don't have to travel. They'll tell you, oh, well, you don't really have to travel. You can do this job from home, from your desk. And so the desk job started. But you see, the problem is that they wanted stories, but they wanted you to almost make up the stories. So there were some organizations, briefcase consultants, who decided to take advantage of the opportunity and just, produce work which was not necessarily good quality. But since they were going to get paid, that's what mattered. And actually, many of us professionals started to get threatened that if we don't reduce our fees, they're going to go with the people who they can afford. And some of us, because we know our value, it was a bit difficult to come down much further than maybe to 3/4 of what you normally charge in a day, coming down to half, and yet the expenses and the time required was even stretched. It just wasn't a match. So what we realized is that soon after that, then COVID hit, right? And then what happened is that we saw many professionals lose their jobs, even some military lose their jobs because they refused to take the vax. Why did they refuse? Because many people felt that it was their right, informed consent. Yeah, they got the information that this vaccine was approved under an emergency, and most vaccines go through about a 10 to 15-year trial phase before they are released and before they are approved for use. And many people made the decision to forego it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that is the situation, that some people refused to take the vaccine. And many people lost their jobs. Yeah, many people were made to redundant because they refused to take the jabs. When that started to happen, I realized that, guys, you know what? this is serious. This is very serious. And I realized that even my job would be affected because I travel for work. I go into offices. And if in those offices, they're requiring their staff to get the jab, and if I was to refuse to take the jab, then I would definitely not get the work. Yeah, it almost came to the point where there's some jobs where they were advertising now and requiring and asking a question that, one of the requirements was that you be vaccinated in order to get that consultancy. So really, we didn't really have much in terms of choice now. I realized that my choices were narrowing down, that I needed time to make a decision whether or not I was going to get that jab. And in the meantime, I needed to do more research. Just because I'm a researcher, I needed to do more research before I'd agree to anything. And I wasn't advising either to go for it or not go for it. But for myself, I realized very soon that I wouldn't be employable, most likely. Many people were going to be unemployable. And it happened. And soon later, after that, what did we see? We saw that many schools closed, businesses closed. In Africa, I remember my neighbors, the children were studying at home, online learning. So it seemed to me like AI was taking over. I felt like, what is going on here? Is it that AI feels that they can replace us? And soon after that, ChatGPT came up, and now everybody could be an expert even without going to school, even without having studied a subject. I started to notice doctors complaining that patients would just be, Googling stuff. Self-diagnosis increased. People would just go to pharmacies and just get medications themselves without having to go to doctors. And all of a sudden, I think many professionals started to see that there was something going on. Now, fast forward to today. This is 2025, 5 years later. And what's the situation? The situation is that a lot of the businesses and professionals who lost their jobs during COVID period are still not fully employed. Many went into the gig economy and are working part-time jobs that do not have any sort of benefits, which you cannot use to plan anything. So many people can no longer afford their mortgages. You cannot even get into a mortgage contract. Many people are delaying marriage. They're delaying having children, even grandchildren. Some of us who are waiting for grandchildren are still waiting and hoping that we'll get them. But we also know that our children are facing a lot of difficulty because many of their jobs are not secure. So a lot of people are in insecure jobs at the moment, and it's hurting the society a lot. Now with the era of Trump, we see restrictions on movement, restrictions on travel, because of the visa controls, because of the warnings by countries, travel warnings and travel advisories against travel to the US. Again, we also have the tariff issue that if you create products in one part of the world, they may not be able to travel to the part of the world that can afford the product without incurring a very large tariff, which would be maybe 50% or 100 or more of the cost of making that product. Then again, you also find that a lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of companies have shed their workers, laid off, just, to reduce the risk, in a sort of risk reduction strategy, as well as because of the fact that many of them have been impacted directly by the tariffs. So where are we going from here? From here, we're looking at a situation where people now have to decide whether or not we have to decide whether or not we are going to continue in the profession that we started with, in the career that we started with, the one that we were trained for prior to 2020 and prior to 2025, or whether we're going to be willing to make a significant shift in the way we approach life, in the way we see life, in the way we view relationships with our workplaces and our family members, and even in terms of our actual environment. There's a lot of changes in the migration policy in many countries. Many people came with the assumption that they could remain and that after a certain number of years that they will be able to transition from immigrant to resident to citizen in a certain number of months or years. But that is also changing. So there's nothing written in stone. Okay? A lot of upheaval in the immigration sector, that's going to impact on the health sector. It's going to impact on taxes for governments. It's going to impact a lot on families and relationships, even in terms of marriages and whether people get married or not. That's why you can now see that there's a single culture that is growing, a growing culture of people calling themselves child-free, not even childless, child-free. It's as if children are a burden, children are a trap. People are even spouse free right now. They're single. So it's almost like people are in, self-preservation mode at the moment. This is where we are. We're in self-preservation mode. And I think that if one wants to live a full life, if one wants to still live a good life and a comfortable life, one has to actually review the conditions in an objective manner as well as realistically, and project 5 years going forward. Where are we going? And like I was talking to my husband this morning, and I thought, why is it that there's such a disconnect between certain people in the world and others? Why is it there's this confusion going on? And I started to realize it's because there are two groups of people in this world. The first group looks at life in a hierarchical manner, okay, vertical manner, down to up to down. And then there's another group that looks at life in a longitudinal manner, okay, in a horizontal manner. So we have people who are looking at each other as equals, who want the same benefits for all. They want people to have access, equality. They want equal opportunity. And then we have these others up here who believe in the hierarchy, that there is one leader and everybody else is down here and serves them. And these two never meet. They're at right angles. We are at right angles literally with each other. And this group that is vertical, many of them are in leadership positions. For the first time, I believe, in our world, I think the majority of leaders in our world right now are on the vertical. And very few leaders are actually on the lateral, on the, horizontal. So there's a disconnect in terms of the way we view life, in terms of our philosophy for life, in terms of our beliefs, values, and ethics, morals, and even in terms of our idea about what is a happy life, what is quality of life. Many of the leaders on the vertical are not even parents. Many of them don't have children. If they do have children, they don't have strong relationships with their kids. But many of the people who are on the vertical, they have children, they have families. On this side here, we have mostly people who do not have families or do not have strong relationships with their families. Even if they have them, you hear a lot of dysfunction in their families. But the ones on the horizontal, from what I see as if, their family relationships are intact, or they at least value family, they value marriage, they value relationships, they believe in relating with the world, they believe in relating with the earth, with animals in a certain manner. So I think the problem that we are experiencing in our world right now is actually that vertical versus horizontal. The fact is that we are on a right angle, and I don't know where we meet, and if we meet or if we don't. If we were to draw a line from down to up and from up to down, the question is, where will we meet? We will be meeting mostly on the vertical, or we will be meeting here on the horizontal. So we have these people going up, and these people who are leading us with my hand up, and then we have the population down here. And if you're to draw a line between down here going up, imagine that, or up here coming down, then there has to be an intersection somewhere on the line. And the question is, does it intersect closer this way, or does it intersect that way? Closer to this line, higher up on the bar here, or is it like this, or is it like that? Yeah. And all that determines the quality of life that we have on the planet right now. And it's important to understand your leaders. It's important for us to understand our leaders, to see who they are, so that we know how to engage with them. Because if we are working with leaders who are only mainly vertical, they're working on the vertical, that means these are people who cannot be swayed. These are people who you cannot really reason with, because they're not about reasoning. They're about operating on their own. They're not about like consulting. If you're up there, you're not consulting. You're making individual decisions. You're making unilateral decisions. But if you're working with leaders who are more on the horizontal, then there's opportunity to have this conversation back and forth, okay? Because they value the input of the citizens. And this is the problem that we have. So I think as we try to evaluate our world and try to understand ourselves and understand where we're going to go, as we try to understand how to function in the current trajectory, in the current situation that we find ourselves now, I think it's just important to analyze, to look at the world and analyze everybody and see who are in your inner circle. The people in your inner circle, who do they subscribe to? Because it's important to understand that those who subscribe to the leadership believe in that vertical, hierarchical, okay, and very individualistic way of living. That means that they are yes people. These are people who, when they're told what to do, they do it without question. Or if in your inner circle you have people who believe in consultation, coming to an agreement, in living in harmony with other people, then I think that will determine which direction you go, whether or not you have a quality of life, and whether or not you really have real good, true relationships. So I think that now going forward, I thought about it all night, and I thought, going forward, I am now evaluating my friendships and my relationships based on that vertical versus horizontal, because there's almost nothing in between. Yeah, you're either pro people or you're not. You're either with the people or you're on your own. Okay, and those don't mix. They don't mix. Even in marriage, they don't mix. These people here marry each other. Those people there, they try, okay, probably to get married to one of these, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work because, this person is actually thinking only individualistically, while this person is thinking communally. It doesn't work. They subscribe to communalism, a communal way of thinking, communal way of working together, togetherness, while this person here works on individualism. So where are we going, people? What do you think about this? I'd love to hear your views on it, because it's kind of like a theory. It's my own philosophy. It's nowhere in any book, but I've just been trying to understand it, and this is my view. So I'd love to hear if you have alternative views. Okay, thank you so much for your time. Yeah, we'll be chatting again. Thank you. To-dos. Bye-bye. Food for thought.